This is the Read to Lead podcast, episode 105.
Hi, I'm Todd Henry, author of Louder Than Words, Harness the Power of Your Authentic Voice. One of my favorite voices belongs to this guy. It's Jeff Brown and the Read to Lead podcast.
The organization doesn't top out at your level of intellect and expertise. You get to take advantage of everybody on your team. That's monster.
Welcome to the Read to Lead podcast with Jeff Brown. Jeff believes that if you desire to achieve true success in business and in life, then consistent and intentional reading is a must. The Read to Lead podcast will not only help you narrow this ever-important reading list, but also bring you key insights and valuable feedback from some of today's most successful and inspiring authors. And now, here's Jeff.
Hi, and welcome to the podcast dedicated to your personal and professional growth, where the topic of leadership is central to our discussion each and every week, but we also dig into items like personal development, productivity, career, business, marketing, and entrepreneurship. In this episode, we chat with Mike Goldman, who is the author of Performance Breakthrough, The 4 Secrets of Passionate Organizations. I'm going to be asking Mike about what has and hasn't changed in the business world in the last 7 or 8 years since the first edition of the book was released, what Mike believes to be the single greatest opportunity for companies regardless of their size. We'll chat specifically, of course, about the 4 secrets of passionate organizations and a lot more. There is still time to take my 2015 listener survey. Just a few more days to do that. This will really help me better serve you on into 2016 and beyond. If you have 15 minutes you can spare, I would really appreciate it. Take the survey right now from anywhere in the world, readtoleadpodcast.com/survey. If you live in the U.S., you can also take it right from your mobile device by texting RTL survey to 33444. That's RTL for Read to Lead survey, all one phrase, to 33444. Mike Goldman is a nationally recognized speaker and consultant with over 25 years of experience at coaching organizations of all sizes and with unique missions, from the local entrepreneur to the Fortune 500. Throughout his career at Accenture and Deloitte Consulting, he has helped Verizon, Disney, Polo Ralph Lauren, Chanel, Kmart, Dillard's, Liz Claiborne, Levi Strauss, and other outstanding companies. In 2007, Mike founded the consulting firm Performance Breakthrough to help mid-sized companies break through the inevitable, predictable barriers of growth. And Mike is also the author of the book Performance Breakthrough, The 4 Secrets of Passionate Organizations. Mike, it's a pleasure. Welcome to the Read to Lead podcast.
Jeff, thank you very much. Excited to be here.
Great. Well, one of the first questions I wanted to ask you, since it's been 5 years since the first edition of the book was published, share what, in your opinion, has and maybe hasn't changed, Mike, in the business world since then.
Really, the fundamentals haven't changed. I wrote the second edition of the book because of questions that I've gotten from the first book, new tools that I've developed in working with my clients, some case studies that I thought were important to get in the book. But it's not really, I didn't re-release it and change it because things have changed. The fundamentals of how to lead and manage people, of how to create a successful business really haven't changed. I guess the only thing that probably has in the time since I wrote the book, when we went through an incredible economic downturn, to I guess put it mildly, and now we're certainly out of that deep funk we were in. These concepts and the ability to lead people becomes even more important because of the layoffs and most people are being asked to do more with less than we were even 5 years ago. So if anything, these concepts just become more and more important.
Well, one of the things you say early in the book really struck a chord with me. I've been on both sides of this equation. You say people don't quit companies, they quit managers. I've worked for managers that I had to eventually quit because I felt they left me no other choice. But I've also more recently worked for managers that I adored and really had great relationships with. Talk about some of the unique challenges companies face managing for today and for tomorrow.
Yeah, well, what it really comes down to is, I could list out, here are 12 different things that are, major challenges. But I think it really all boils down to one major thing. And it's really about finding, keeping, leveraging A players on your team. That's what it really comes down to. And you could break that down into a lot of different pieces. But, you can't have an extraordinary company, especially for smaller and mid-sized, more entrepreneurial companies. If you want to have an extraordinary company, you need extraordinary people. And the biggest challenge I see companies have is they're stuck with a bunch of B and C players. They don't know how to find A players. For some reason, they're keeping their C players around, and you're just not going to be a great company with those kinds of people challenges.
Well, with the 4 secrets of passionate organizations, let's dig into secret number 1. It's what Mike calls acceptance, and the prevailing wisdom suggests that all employees be treated equally. It makes sense, but Mike says that's actually a mistake. Mike, why is that?
Yeah, well, the example I like to use is I ask people, if they believe in the golden rule as it relates to how they treat their people at work. And I remind people the golden rule is treat others the way you would want to be treated is one way to say that. And most people say, well, yeah, that's a great idea. And they want to throw stones at me when I say I think that's a horrible idea. And it's a horrible idea because for me to believe that the right way to treat people is exactly the way I want to be treated, is I would have to believe that everybody's motivated by the same things that motivate me. I'd have to believe that everybody's learning style is the same as my learning style. I'd have to believe that everybody's cultural background is my cultural background, and that's crazy. So, the biggest challenge for leaders is that you've got to treat everyone as the unique individuals that they are. I call the secret acceptance because you've got to accept that not everybody's like you. If you might be motivated, your primary motivation, might be money, and that's not a good thing or a bad thing, but let's say that's your primary motivation. If you've got somebody reporting to you who's primarily motivated by time with family or service to the community, you better think about some ways to motivate them that may be very different than the way you'd want to be motivated.
And that segues nicely into the second secret, something that Mike calls leverage. I think of like if your child's report card includes a bad grade or two, your tendency as a parent is to want to fix that problem. And societally, we kind of hone in on that very thing, is looking at the weaknesses and going, okay, how can we fix those? And in the workplace, a lot of times when that's the mantra, that can actually be counterproductive. Talk a bit about leverage and why being well-rounded is not necessarily remarkable. Yeah,
and leverage is about leveraging strengths. It's not about beating people up for their weaknesses. And the example I like to use is if you look at an employee, that let's say you've got an employee that's been working for you for 6 months, so you've got enough time to understand their strengths and weaknesses, maybe not enough time to coach them on it. If they've got 2 areas where they're outstanding, one, they just have some natural talent, one area where they're mediocre, and then maybe another 1 or 2 where they're really just failing, they have no natural talent, they have no passion in that area. The tendency is, let's go focus on those weak areas and make them strong. The challenge is that's a recipe for creating a mediocre employee. Because as you're working on those weak areas, number one, if there's no natural talent there, you're not going to make them great in those areas. 99% of the time, they're not going to become great in those areas. At best, they'll approach mediocre. At the same time, they're not feeling real good about themselves because you're causing them to overly focus on areas they're not passionate about, they don't have any natural talents for. So what do you think is going to happen in those areas where they are doing great and they do have natural talent? Well, because of the attitude shift, because of where your focus is, those areas are actually going to come down in performance and also start to approach mediocre as opposed to being incredible. So you wind up with a mediocre employee, and that's a recipe for for mediocre as a business. In this day and age, mediocrity in your business typically means you're out of business. So what I encourage my clients to do, what I want companies to do, is leverage those strengths. The fallacy is people think they have the most room for growth in areas of weakness. It's not true. We actually have the greatest room to grow in those areas where we have natural talent. The sky's the limit. So I encourage companies, have a well-rounded team. A well-rounded team means I've got people that, when I look across my team, I've got people that are great in all of the areas I need people to be great at. But when I look at any one individual, I want them to be extraordinary in a few really important areas.
What do you say to someone, Mike, who says, if everyone is focused on their strengths, won't there be a bunch of stuff that just doesn't get done? In other words, people can't spend 100% of their time working on just the things that they like to do, right?
Yeah, I think that's a key point. And that's why I say it's important to have not well-rounded individuals that are mediocre at everything, but I want a well-rounded team. So if I've got 5 different key things that have to happen within my organization, to certainly oversimplify for a moment, but if I've got 5 key things that need to happen within my organization, I want to make sure that I've got people within my organization who are extraordinary at a few of those 5 things. And when I put them all together, I've got people who are extraordinary in all of those things, but not in any one person. So it makes it important when you're hiring to take into account strengths when you're hiring. So if I've got a bunch of people that are great, strategic, big picture thinkers, they just have a natural talent for thinking of solutions to these big problems, but I've got no one who can dot every I and cross every T and follow through on the details, I'm going to have a problem. So if I've got a lot of those great strategic thinkers and I'm going out to hire someone new for my team, I better look to hire in areas of strength that I don't currently have on my team. So I don't have, everybody's focused on the big picture and nobody's dealing with follow through in the details. I want to make sure I've got a team of individuals where I've got some folks who are extraordinary in all those areas.
Well, the third secret is impact. Describe this one for us, Mike, and in particular, how impact builds on the first 2 secrets.
Yeah, the concept or the secret of impact is really about giving people the freedom to get the job done. It's allowing them to take ownership, feel like they have true impact on your organization's bottom line, especially for entrepreneurs. We always say, well, no one's ever going to be as passionate about the business as we are because we own it. And I get that. But man, you want to cultivate an environment where people get pretty damn close to your level of passion. And the way to do that is through allowing them to feel like owners, allowing them to have impact. The way it builds on the first 2 secrets is that if I understand what make my people unique and accept that we're all different, that first secret of acceptance, if I then leverage people's strengths, which is the second secret, well, if I've hired the right people, I know them, I'm leveraging their strengths, I ought to be able to give them enough room to get the job done. And instead of telling them, here's what I want done, here are the 127 steps you need to follow in order to get the job done, you know what? If you hired right, you got great people, give them the right tools, help them understand the outcome you're looking for and why that's important. Build a framework for them around the how and why of your organization, your core values, your purpose as an organization. Build that framework so people know kind of the rules of the game. And man, let them loose. We're all different. We all don't there's not one right way to do a job. Impact is about letting people loose. So you don't always have to be the smartest person at the table. You got a room full of folks who are just, ready to go and bring some major positive impact for your organization.
So what's wrong with dictating those answers to your team, Mike? What happens when you start doing that instead of giving them that trust and autonomy?
Yeah, well, number one, when you dictate the answers, you're going to lose your A players really quickly because they want to go somewhere where they have the ability to think. So that's number one. But number two is now you own the answer. So Jeff, if I tell you, hey, we've got this challenge, I need you to go do A, B, C, D, and E, and then get back to me and tell me when you're done. Well, if you do A, B, and C and you hit a brick wall, what are you going to do? You're going to look back at me and say, okay, genius, what do you want me to do next? But if I come to you, and this is the key, even if I think I know the answer, even if I think maybe today I'm the smartest guy around the table, if I start a discussion and if I ask questions, not through some technique, but with real curiosity behind, and I say, hey, we've got this problem, Jeff, what do you think we ought to do? We go around the table and we have ideas. You know what? Number one, maybe I'm not the smartest person around the table that day. Maybe you've got a better idea, and then let's go do it. But let's say I was the smartest person around the table that day, and after 5-10 minutes of discussion, we come around to exactly what I thought the answer was. Now the question is, who owns the answer? Do I own it, or do we own it, or do you own it? It's a little different. So if we have that discussion and you come up with the answer, and now you go do A, B, C, D, and E, and you hit that brick wall when you do A, B, and C, instead of looking at me and saying, okay, genius, what do you want me to do next? Now, since you own that answer, you're going to dig a hole underneath. You're going to go, you're going to climb up above it. You're going to run around. You're going to get creative in finding an answer because you own that solution rather than you just following my direction. That's a major, major impact on your culture where every decision doesn't need to come down to you. You as the owner, as the entrepreneur, don't always need to be the smartest person around the table. The organization doesn't top out at your level of intellect and expertise. You get to take advantage of everybody on your team. That's monster.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the work of Liz Weissman, who you may know.
Multipliers, sure.
Multipliers, yeah, and just the power of leveraging the collective brain power in the room, and how the best leaders make everybody smarter when they do that.
Absolutely.
Well, that brings us to secret number 4, celebration. I have a song in my head stuck in there all day after. First, share why this is important, Mike, and what are some practical methods for implementing celebration into the workplace?
Yeah, this is important. I really believe, we spend most of our waking hours at work. It should be a positive environment. There should be a constant flow of positive energy throughout the organization. We should be able to have fun at work. So that's what celebration is all about. It really builds, again, on the first 3 secrets. It says if you really understand your people, if you're leveraging their strengths, if you're allowing them to have impact within the organization, what are you doing to celebrate the not just the results, but the activity that leads to those results? And what I mean by that is, I'll use an example from my own business. If I somehow figured out a way to double my number of sales meetings with new clients, starting today, I'm doubling my number of sales meetings. Would I be more profitable this week? And the answer is no. In fact, I'd probably be less profitable because I'd probably be spending more money taking potential clients out for lunch and things like that. There's a sales cycle. And once that sales cycle is done, I've got to perform some work. And once that work is performed, now I got to invoice it, and then I've got to get paid for it. There's a real gap between the activity that I know is going to lead to a bigger, better, more healthy, more profitable business. It's a big gap between that activity and the result. And I think a lot of companies, most companies are pretty good if, hey, we beat profitability by 15% this year, or our revenues went up 30%, let's celebrate. Most companies are fairly good at doing that. But what companies miss is the activities that lead to those results. The challenge is if I don't celebrate the activity and I'm just waiting for the result, I may be so burnt out from doubling my number of sales meetings and not seeing the results and not celebrating the results, I may quit before those results actually happen. So we have to get much better at defining what are those activities that lead to the results we're looking for, figure out how to celebrate those activities, how to create contests and themes around those activities to make them fun. And it really is just about creating a more positive, more engaging, more fun environment. And when people hear the word fun and they think it's soft, squishy, crap that, it's not fun, it's work. But I got to tell you, and I can give you examples from different parts of my life and my career, but fun breeds creativity. Fun breeds teamwork. Fun breeds profitability. So it's not just about, I want to be a nice guy and make sure my employees have fun at work. It's about the bottom line. More fun, the right environment, you're going to have a more profitable, more sustainable business.
Well, each of these concepts, no doubt, is powerful on its own. But, Mike, what are the possibilities when we manage as companies, as leaders, to combine all four?
Yeah, I think when you combine all four, you become, I mentioned earlier, biggest challenge for companies today is finding, keeping, leveraging A players. And I think, when you combine all these things, you become a magnet for A players. You're going to keep the A players you've got. Those A players you've got, well, who do they know? They know other A players. So they're going to be referring folks in as the leader, as the entrepreneur, as the CEO. You're pumped up. One of the things I talk about in my book is, it's all about injecting more passion in the organization. It's got to start with you. So as the leader, if you're not leveraging your own strengths, then forget about leveraging anybody else's. Start with you. So the result of this is a more passionate leader, a more passionate organization, more A players, and it just feeds on itself. And I really believe kind of the sky's the limit. And, it's not just about bottom line. It's about really enjoying and being passionate about what you're doing. But man, that bottom line's going to be there too.
I want to point out that this is just a great, easy read. I started it last night and finished it this morning, and the story is engaging and keeps your attention. I want to move on to some questions not directly related to the book, Mike, but before I do that, is there anything else from the book you want to make sure that we know?
No, I guess the only thing I'd mention, and I appreciate what you just said about the book, is one of the reasons why I do, hear the feedback that it's kind of an engaging, quick read, is it's, as you said, it's told in the form of a story, but it's actually based on a true story. That book is actually semi-autobiographical. It's about a business owner and a father who has a son with something called Asperger's syndrome. My son is now 21. So he's a little older than the little boy that's in the book, but the story comes out of a true story. So it was really close to my heart, and I think people, when they read it, it feels real to them because a lot of it is. Well,
I'm banking on the fact that you like to read. So I was wondering if you could name for us a couple of books that you've read that have had an impact on you. Maybe they're books you're currently reading, and share why or how they've impacted you, Mike, as they have.
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, I'm a Goodreads guy. I don't know if you're a Goodreads subscriber. And my challenge this year was to read 30 by the end of the year, and I'm already up to, I think I'm reading my 28th right now. So I'm gonna blow away my goal, which I'm proud of.
Awesome.
A few key books. One book that I read a number of years ago by Verne Harnish is called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. That's a book. He just came out with an update of that kind of Rockefeller Habits 2.0 called Scaling Up. But that's a book that I read about 5 or 6 years ago that really changed my life and my business. And I said, man, I want to focus on working with my clients, on these things. And it was all about creating the right execution rhythms and the right strategy for a business. And it really kind of drove, where I focus as a business. I'd recommend actually the new version, Scaling Up, for anyone who's looking to build their business. So Rockefeller Habits, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits was a big one. One of them that I just read this year is a book called Uncontainable. It's actually written by the founder and CEO of the Container Store, which you may have heard of. Very successful retailer. And the reason I mention that one is Kip Tindall, the owner and the founder, talks about this concept called 1 = 3. And 1 equals 3, which fits in so nicely with my book and the work I do with my clients. 1 equals 3 says one exceptional person, one exceptional performer within your organization equals 3 mediocre performers.
Wow.
And I really believe that, and I've seen it over and over again. So companies that have a lot of B and C players and said, well, we can't afford to hire anymore, and we're not retaining people. You hire 1 A player, and they're going to do the work of 3 B/C players. It goes back to this idea of finding, keeping, leveraging those A players. So uncontainable. That's not the only concept Kip talks about, but great book, talking about how he's built that company and some of the great principles that he's used in order to do it.
Mike, I know you do quite a bit of public speaking. I'd be curious to know what you've learned over the years, some tips that you might be able to pass along for delivering an impactful and memorable public talk.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're talking about reading books, but one of the things I'd probably not recommend is to go buy a book on public speaking, because I've looked at some of those, and I've been speaking for many, many years. There's a lot in this life that I'm really not good at all, and don't have a talent for, don't have a passion for. Public speaking is something I've always found to be something that I just love to do. People are so fearful of it, and I just sometimes I'm more comfortable on stage in front of 500 people than I am talking to somebody one-on-one. And I've looked at some of these books that talk about public speaking. I'm like, well, man, I could always be better. Let me read a book. And they just make it so mechanical that you start to really think about everything you're doing, and it just kills you. So for me, my best advice with public speaking has got to be, you got to kind of magnify who you are on stage. And I know for me, when a speaker that can tell a really good story, it's not just about facts. It's not just about concepts, but a speaker that can tell me a really good emotional story, that sticks with me. People don't remember facts and figures. People don't remember, I saw a speaker not too long ago who had literally an hour-long talk. They had 5 principles, 6 values, 12 best practices, just all of that. And it's just too much to remember. Keep it simple. What are the key 2, 3, 4 points? Tell stories, make it emotional. That's the way it's going to be memorable. That's how you're going to get your point across to an audience.
Well, Mike, finally, I'd be curious to know what's next up for you. What are you and your team working on now that's got you guys really excited?
Yeah, one of the things I'm working on, and I've got thankfully a thriving coaching and consulting practice, writing for me is getting the word out there, and it's kind of means to an end. So the major thing I'm doing is working on building that practice, and thankfully it's going incredibly well, working with some great clients. But I think what's interesting too is I've got an ebook that should be coming out actually within the next few weeks that I'm really excited about. It's not a full book like the 4 Secrets of Passionate Organizations, but it's an ebook, and it's called Right People, Right Execution, and then the subtitle is Strategy is Overrated. And it's really all about how culture eats strategy for lunch. And I didn't create that quote, but the person who did is kind of slipping my mind, but I readily admit I'm stealing that from someone. But it's really all about how, you could have a great strategy, but if you don't have the right people and you don't have the right execution disciplines, you will fail. You can have a mediocre strategy, but have A players that are executing with discipline, executing with accountability, and you will blow away the competition. So this ebook really focuses on, what are some of those people, tools, techniques, skills that you need, and what does it mean to have great disciplined execution. And I really get down into some specifics that people just take and start executing on.
Excellent. Well, the book, again, is called Performance Breakthrough, The 4 Secrets of Passionate Organizations. And in this edition, Mike's included a website for continual updates. We'll have that in the show notes and how to connect with Mike as well. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I have really enjoyed the book. So glad that Maya was persistent in scheduling this. At first, I just kind of set it aside. Oh, I'll get to that eventually. But her consistency paid off. And as soon as I skimmed it, I thought this is definitely a book I want to talk about, an author I want to speak with, and I'm so glad I did. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Maya, for your persistence, and Jeff, thank you. It's been an interesting discussion. I appreciate it.
In the show notes page for today's episode, readtoleadpodcast.com/105, you'll find links not only to the Passionate Organizations website I mentioned a moment ago, but also several ways to connect with Mike should you want to pursue that relationship further. And the Read to Lead podcast, by the way, makes for a great conversation starter. Don't forget. We are including links to the books and other resources Mike mentioned as well, plus a link to our 2015 listener survey. Be sure to take a few minutes to check that out if you have time. If you're up for discovering new podcasts, I have a couple you may want to consider. One is from Ben Tyler. It's called An Evolving Lifestyle Podcast, focusing on entrepreneurship. And also a brand new podcast from Mike Chan. If you're interested in startups, both launching and growing one, then this podcast is for you. It's called the Go and Grow Podcast. I've got links to both of those shows in today's show notes page. And again, that's readtoleadpodcast.com/105. Finally, I want to say thanks to Angus Nelson. He's the latest gentleman to rate and review the podcast in iTunes. He says there's always something new to learn and gives it 5 stars. Thank you very much, Angus. If you'd like to rate and review the podcast, visit that show notes page where you'll find links to rate and review it in both iTunes and on Stitcher. Well, that does it for this week. I look forward to seeing you next time for the Read to Lead podcast.
Thanks so much for listening to the Read to Lead podcast. As a subscriber, we challenge you to be more than just a passive listener. Become a vital member of the community. Visit us on the web at readtoleadpodcast.com. Until next time, remember, leaders read and readers lead.